Hello, everybody, and welcome to Rocket Lasso Live. We're sort of in a bonus area where I'm trying to figure out exactly how I want to wrap it up. There'll probably be one more episode, is what I'm thinking. I know earlier I had said that we were kind of doing the season finale, but that's because I was working really hard to get Recall out and trying to get R23 video, learn R23, record R23 videos, make presentation files and all that. So anyway, we're back, and this is episode 35, and I was kind of looking forward to just doing a regular stream. I've had a couple of guests on. We did Recall, and then we did R23, and then we had Rick on as a guest, and then Casey on as a guest, and even Gavin was a guest recently. So I wanted to do a regular episode, keep it nice and simple. So it's episode 35, which is a lot of episodes for the year. And I'm pretty excited. How is everyone doing? First of all, I need some important information. YouTube changed the way the streaming works. So if you're on YouTube, can you let me know if the video and audio seems correct? That's very important. So thank you for giving me feedback on that. Is everything else working correctly? Let's see who do we got. We got Dean, Scott, Munthies, Oliver, Apple, Tobias, V, Ruckus, hello, Zach, Eric, Hippo, how's it going? Hollow Woodsman, welcome. Let's see, MW, of course, Shane, welcome. Over on YouTube, we got Jeremy and Nicholas, Boss Design, Perry, Michelangelo, Nico, I think you told me how to pronounce it, but Ibrahim, not sure. Michael, Alan, lots of people showing up. Okay, there's enough names for now. I hope it is going well for everyone. Let's see. Show off Recall. Yeah, we can. I mean, if there's any questions about Recall, we can talk about it. I'm not going to go super crazy. Okay, seems to be thumbs up on that. So we can start the proper stream in just a moment. So what is there to cover? Well, like I said, I'll probably do one more live stream next week. Will probably be the official season finale. Usually, I like to try and make a bigger deal of it. And if you noticed last time, it was just kind of like, okay, sort of the last episode. But yeah, one more. It should be good. Thanks for the feedback on YouTube. Yeah, I have to read. It's a new way of doing it. So. Gotta keep that in mind. Thank you, Scott and Dean, saying you use Recall all the time now. Good to hear. We've actually got a tiny update coming out really soon. It's kind of like a bug fix. Nobody's found these bugs, but we've kind of found our own little bugs. We're just making the camera. It works a little bit better with cameras now. It's not really, nobody's going to be able to tell the difference, but we're just going to put that new one out. Although we do have a couple new features lined up to do. And we're working on the Recall retail version, which should be something. Let's see. So everybody, well, anyway, let's start getting this proper stuff going. Get questions together so we can do a somewhat regular episode. So if you have any questions, general questions for me, that's fine. But if you got Cinema 4D questions, if you have a link to something cool somebody made, then feel free to start putting the links in. You cannot put a link on YouTube. It just doesn't let you. I don't think it does. I guess it's a new setup now, so you can try. I don't think it will. So if you want to do a link, you got to go on Twitch. But you type out a question on YouTube, even if you want, just put a big capital question so it jumps out at me a little bit. And I just kind of monitor the chat over here. And and then I'm going to kind of disappear and come back with a proper intro. And then we've got a new little segment. I want to try and do a regular segment on episode, so I haven't really gotten it ready, but we'll see how it goes. And anything else to cover? I mean, yeah. We'll talk about Recall, I'm sure, at some point. R23, there's a new my giant video for R23, as well as 2 live streams about R23. So I think there's a lot of good content there. And anything else important? No, nothing super crazy. So, yeah, I'll be right back. If you'd start putting, first of all, I do need questions to come in if we're going to tackle anything. But if you do put a link to somebody's artwork, somebody's video, I need to be able to see who made it, the studio or the artist who put it together. Otherwise, it has to be a genericified question somehow. So I'll be right back, and we will begin proper. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Rocket Lasso Live Season 2, Episode 23. And this should be the second to last episode for the season. I think I might have said that a few episodes back, but there was more to do, and I wanted to do a regular type episode. So we are now in a post-Recall has launched world. A post-R23 is out in the world episode. So we'll be taking questions all over the place. I've got a lot of different questions coming in, mostly not specifically cinema questions, but stuff all over the place. Jeremy's asking how the website is going, and yes, the Rocket Lasso website is coming along well. Actually, the developers working on it, I just had them implementing a feature where, in YouTube you can put time codes and it'll jump to it. We're implementing that into a website because nothing does that by default. So the first version of that is working really well. So once I get all the tutorials posted, then the site will go live. That should cover the basics. Questions are starting to come in. Let's see. Sounds good. Wanting me to show off Recall. We'll perhaps do that a little bit later. Perry, that sounds more like an After Effects thing. We'll think about that. Making a Doctor Strange type portal. We'll think about it. And Ancient Hippo actually has a link for us, so we will click a link. Let me see if there's any other kind of talky questions. Yeah, bonus streams, regulars rolling in. Yep, sounds good. All right, I will share the screen here, camera plus screen. Get this to pop open and see what we've got. So you said about a minute in, so it's at the very end. This is a video from Olga Midlenko 9 years ago. Okay, interesting. Going crazy for years, trying to figure out the polygons come flickering on. So yeah, let's check it out. Okay, a bunch of stars slowly coming in. Laser green. Okay, then yeah, okay, so it slowly is building up to a series of polygons getting generated. Bing, bing, bing. Interesting. Yeah, I think there might be some things. Yeah, super subtle. Interesting. There's several different layers here. The specific question is about these blinking polygons, and I think we might be able to address something along those lines. So thanks for the question. Very nice. Thank you everyone who is showing up to come hang out and ask and answer questions. So here we are in R23. I don't think we need any specific R23 functionality for this question. However, we might be able to implement it in some various places. The first thing I wonder if the new mesher has a triangulation mode, because there's mesh quad dominant. Oh yeah, we can do triangles. So okay, we might be able to use the new remesher just for fun, because well, that's just to generate some random triangles. Of course, there's more consistency with what we saw there. So I don't know yet. Triangles. What would be the best way I would go about making triangles? I mean, we can have fun. We've talked about this type of thing before, where we can start out with a very simple plane and we can start doing different effects on it, especially if we want to keep it parametric. I could do something like creating a bevel, putting the bevel as a child, and in R23 we get this nice highlighting happening, a nice little extra bonus thing. I want to bevel the points, and by increasing this amount, you'll see that those points will begin to bevel and we get some more interesting looking geometry. By limiting it, I can push it further, and I can see we've got these inverted angles, although it seems to break on the edge a little bit. I don't remember it doing that. It's interesting. Yep. Yeah, we can do something like this. Create a smoothing, perhaps? I don't know if smoothing will do anything here. This is stuff that's sort of done in that elephant tutorial. Well, that's interesting. A little different than I would be expecting. These are choosing some weird places to decide to deform. Now, typically, I would take this and put it into a connect object to kind of bake down all of these points. I'm just curious if that smoothing carries through the effect if we do this here as well. Yeah, that's very bizarre. Oh, interesting. I don't remember that happening in earlier versions, but maybe there's something different now. I do want to create triangles, so let's see. We've got the new mesher, so by dropping this into the new remesher, it's going to attempt to remesh everything, but it's going to be trying to do a very clean job and make it very, you see all the polygons are very even, very directional, and they're very square, which is nice. If I change this over to triangles, then you'll see it become triangulated. But something that's, and I mean, that's cool. There's a it's an odd mesh, but it's a triangulated mesh. I wonder what would happen if we just put the straight up plane into it. Would that still triangulate it? No, it does. So this is kind of a triangulated version of this plane. That's interesting. Yeah, okay. Well, we can just continue from there. I didn't need all this extra complication. Interesting. So now I've got some triangles. This is a new mesh. Put that into a group. And having done that, let's create a displacer. Although, yeah, we can use a displacer. Technically, a plane effector as a deformer calculates a little bit quicker. Shading, noise, and currently this is just vertex normal, so it's based on the direction of the object, but that's pretty much fine if we were to push these up a little bit like this. Now you can kind of see that we're getting these displaced triangles just in space. Now my thought is, what if we do deform this with a random effector? That could be interesting. I don't think we've ever specifically done this before. Creating a random effector, I want it to happen after the displacer because I kind of want this to be the base form. And then using this random, I could feed in a noise and turn that to indexed. So every single one of them should be individually getting affected. We won't see anything until we change this to be a deformer, specifically a point deformer. And now you can see everything's being deformed. Because this is a random effector, typically we don't use this, but because it's a random effector, we should be able to push this further on these different parameters on X, Y, and Z. And by increasing these numbers, I think everything will displace in a completely random direction. Right now, I think it'll be, actually it is animated out of the gate. Oh yeah, it's set to noise by default. So yeah, so this is set to noise and now these are all moving around. Change the animation speed down smaller, and the scale is already pretty small. They look individual, but yeah, we can make that number very small and they will all feel like they're individually moving, unrelated to each other. If we start making this number larger and larger, then we'll start seeing some uniformity through them. Now you can see that they start feeling like they're related to each other because it gets so large. Now, yeah, so we'll leave that nice and small. And now you can see each individual one moving around, pretty random. We'll let it travel slowly, sort of like we were seeing. And honestly, this is pushing to whatever degree we feed this number in. So we could make this larger, like 333, 333. And now they should be large enough that they can start passing through each other. That was actually a little bit of effort to get to some very random looking geometry, but this is essentially what I wanted. A bunch of triangles that can just move around and pass through each other. If we were inclined after this calculates, we could make a smoothing deformer and drop that after. And this should, yeah, that's interesting because it's smoothing everything a lot, but the edges are smoothed less. I wonder if there's like a setting for that. But if I were to decrease this, it gets really smooth, increase it. For stiffness, it goes back to the original, and we could decrease our iterations. So we could just smooth it a little bit and then, take the edge off, but I don't want to do that. So we will delete that and let it move around super blobby-like. Okay, having done that, why don't we save the scene file? This is an important time to mention that if you are supporting on Patreon, then you can get access to these scene files. Scene files, this will be number 1A. Triangle blinking. I like that we're working from a file that's more than like 9 years old. All right, so now we've got some geometry. It's pretty low poly overall, which is to our advantage, and everything is moving around, doing a nice job. So now, I hope I don't hit a dead end immediately here, because what I'd like to do, I guess they were blinking visually, but I'm gonna have them like blink fully on or off. There might be additional ways around that. And actually I can think of some, but let's just make it purely visual in the viewport here instead of material-wise. Now we need to explode all these polygons out into individual objects. Actually, we might be able to do this with PolyFX as well, but then they're on and off. There's a lot of layers to think about here. PolyFX would calculate way quicker because it keeps it parametric. So if I were to make a PolyFX and then make this the next thing that is getting deformed, and the fact that this mesh is after, it doesn't matter. I can move it up. And so what's happening is the mesh is calculated first, and then a displacer, then the random, then the PolyFX. Now, the reason I'm using a PolyFX is what it does is it keeps it a single model, which makes everything run really quick. What this means is if I were to say 0.5, 0.5, 0.5 on everything, every little polygon has gotten to be half the size. And already visually, that's kind of cool. Like we're getting this coherence between them, but they're all set to 0.5. Now we don't need to, if you right click on these up and down arrows, then it goes to default. We don't need all of them to be scaled all the time. So what I'm thinking is we hit save real quick, go into the effectors tab of this and start feeding in some effectors. Specifically, probably another noise, but possibly a plane. I kind of like a plane because we get more control. So I'll add a plane in there. I think it should be applied. Yep. And I don't want to affect the position. I want to affect the scale. And we'll set the scale to -1, uniform, -1, absolute. So now all of them are scaled down to 0. Under the fall off of the plane effector, we are now controlling this completely separately. I can add something like a random field, and a random field is a good way to get to noise. Now, you saw that we used a noise effector, but now we're using a noise field, and the noise field is actually way better because you actually get the noise settings in here, which is really nice. So we can see each one of these is being heavily affected. It's animating and very, very twitchy. Honestly, I'm completely fine with the scale. We might, maybe we should slow it down. Animation speed. Actually, right now there is no animation speed. This is being calculated by them passing through. Yeah, currently they're drifting through this noise, which is interesting. I don't have a problem with that, but we might need to, yeah, there we go. So I calmed it down by increasing my overall scale. So everything's going to be passing through their noise more slowly. And then clicking randomize positions. So they're not related to each other. Each one is getting moved out to some random point in space for how they get sampled. So that'll make sense to me. Now these are all moving around. What we need is these are slow. You see how they're growing and shrinking. If you watch any one, they're growing, shrinking, growing, shrinking. So we need to clamp this somehow. We want this to be full power or not. So we can do that with several things. We have a clamp, but personally, I like using the curve just because it's very visual. So if I were to take this and start pulling it way in, you see everything gets really big and occasionally small. If I pull the upper part in, essentially we're increasing the contrast. So if I pull these in really tight on top of each other, you're going to see that this is determining, it's remapping the noise, but essentially we're saying, well, it can only be one or the other. So having done that, if we start pulling this down, then we're saying, okay, map the lower edge of this. And if we pull this up, we got to find that sweet spot. But that's why I like using these handles, is because I can really easily find this nice medium ground. And now you can see how I've remapped this so that the noise is heavily contrasted. And now they're just kind of popping in and out, in, out. And that's actually working pretty well overall. We could make it happen more or less often by scooting this one way or the other, so I can make it happen. Keep in mind, a noise very rarely gets all the way to the bottom and all the way to the top. Noises typically live more towards the middle, so I wouldn't expect to be able to go all the way to the edge. But now you can see how we've mapped that. Now, having said that, there is a pretty cool function we can do here, which is, where is it? Quantize. We can quantize something. And by dropping the steps down to maybe 1, yeah. So if we said 2, there could be an in-between state. So by setting this to 1, essentially what we're saying is it has to be 0 or 1, black or white, full power or no power. But that is remapping after our curve. So in spite of, you see how I have that little bit of a transition here? So it's still remapped like this, but then it's going to go fully black and white right where my edge is. Where if I turn this off, my quantize is right at the 50% mark, but because I've got the curve beforehand, I'm scooting it from one side to the other. Now this does give us a little more leeway where this could be spread out, and visually I don't expect it to change that much because once again, it's going to essentially clamp them to black and white. But now we can still scoot this left and right and change where that lives. It's kind of the workflow I like to do there. I'll save this as the next iteration, 1B. Alrighty. So that seems to be working. You see, they just turn on and off. What I'm thinking is, and I don't know how well this will work, but I would love if we could add on a delay onto here. So if we make a delay, this is calculating after everything else. And now you can see that there's a smooth on it. And I really, really like doing this technique because what was happening, well, actually, let's step through here. So here's just like total randomness moving around, and they're slowly drifting up and down in scale. We turn on the curve and really make a heavy contrast. So you can see they're kind of slowly transitioning from one to the other. But it's based on the noise, okay? But then we say clamp it. It's black or white. It's full power or not. And we say, okay, cool. That's now what is happening. And then after that happens, then I want to calculate this delay, which currently is set to smooth. So instead of all of them like moving, scaling up and scaling down at a set at a random speed because of where they might be passing through the noise. Now it's like, well, they're already black and white, and this is just smoothing between the black and white state. So these will all scale up and scale down at a consistent speed. And what's great about this is now they are consistent. So I could drop this down to something small like 10%, and you get that little bit of a transition. You see how they're shrinking in, shrinking out, but really fast. And of course, and we move it way up, and now they're going to very slowly transition up and down. Of course, if it goes up and then it goes from like it's black and it turns white, it's going to start scaling up, and then it turns black, it's going to immediately start scaling back down. So it probably won't get to its maximum point. So something a little bit lighter here would probably work best. But now we can let these scale up and scale down. Also, I guess before the delay, we could also put in, if we were so inclined, we could put in a little decay as well. And what this decay will do is see that maximum scale. So even if it just blinks on, it's going to see that maximum and then slowly fade it out. And I probably would put it below the quantize so that everything is going to live for a little bit longer. I think it's going to be very unlikely that something pops in and then disappears very quickly if it's working the way I think it does. And then we can put the delay. So now everything will live for a certain amount of time under the delay. That's the thought. So now you can see that they're popping in and out with a little bit of life. Now that's the delay set to smooth, and we'll even rename that smooth just to distinguish. Turn that off temporarily, and I'm going to try using another delay, but this time it'll be a delay spling. Okay, so changing this to a spring type, then now we should be able to get it to spring up and down. Now this puts us in, we've got two options here. Currently it's clamped, which means it's going to shoot past 100% and then rubber band around that 100%. But it hits the wall. It can't go above 100% because we're clamped. So turning off the clamp, these can now overshoot that original amount, and they'll actually invert as they shrink down, and they'll go larger as they go above. So that could be a powerful addition. So I want this. I can't believe I renamed spring wrong again. It's hard to type. It's beyond. It's after my key. The keyboard is behind the microphone, so it's hard to see. Okay, so we can combine these two, so we can actually smooth it out, and now they'll transition a little bit smoother, and then the springiness can come in after. Now I think it's a little bit too springy for me. But yeah, right there you can see how we can calm that down a bit. Ring, wing. So yeah, it smoothly comes in, but we get that little bit of jitter on the top and then as they shrink away. So a bunch of fun little additions that we can put on there. So yeah, I actually do like that quite a bit. Now, let's give that another save because I think that's a fine little place for that to be. But I'd like to kind of see those lines existing around, and let's see if we can do that somehow. We got this remesh, but what I think we might need is an instance of this. And you never know if an instance is going to work or not. And actually, yeah, this makes sense because, yeah, this is looking at that remesh before these happened. So we have to rearrange a couple things here. Specifically, we need to pull out the poly effects and then have the instance look at this null. And there we go. Now we should have two copies of that original mesh. And now this one is getting reference. So if I put Alt-G, put that into another null, and this can be, the reference. Now that that's happened, if we put the poly effects after that null, hopefully, let's hide that. Yeah, now we've got one that is doing that same effect that we saw already, but then we've got a copy that is doing this original motion. Now, I got to say, this is, it's really suddenly choking. Something about this instance does not like seeing the original one, but we'll just keep moving forward from there. Because now that we have this shape all outlined, we could do kind of anything we want with it. The simplest version, I almost never like doing it, but there is the basic atom array, and you can do that. And I usually make the sphere the same size as the cylinder. We can even drop the polygons way down, and now we can end up with this as the final geometry. Let's make it stand out a little bit. Perhaps make a nice bright white material and make a duplicate of that. And the polygons could be, we could randomize the colors if we were so inclined, but right now we'll just make it a bright pink. So now we should get, yeah, these polygons will live inside and occasionally scale up and scale down, filling in the overall shape. And all of that is being controlled with a nice super duper parametric rig, entirely parametric. At any given point, we could jump inside and say, okay, we're not seeing enough polygons here. I want to see more polygons. So jumping inside actually we want this plane effector. That plane effector going to the fall off, and here is where this is all being controlled. Specifically, the curve is the major one. So if I start stretching this up, immediately as I pull it up, you'll see we'll get more polygons living at any given moment. And these can snap in, snap out. And we have all those different layered up controls we were just talking about. And yeah, working pretty well. Just for fun, why don't we randomize the colors? I think that should be, well, we didn't explode it, so getting different colors might be tougher. We ended up using the PolyFX route, but the original route I was going to do was going to be using the fracture object. Now that I think about it, well, we'd need to do that if we were going to colorize these randomly. I don't want to do that, so I don't think I'm going to, because I'd like to tackle more questions. But yeah, I think I'll end this one here, as we've got all these random polygons doing their thing. Of course, any change we want to make, we can always go back to this random and have these not displace as much. So this could be a lot calmer. We could increase our animation speed, 55, and let these be moving around quicker, but not intersecting each other as much. This could be on any shape, any form. It could be a big, giant, full mesh, and that would, this would translate into any piece of geometry we want to feed in on this plane. I suppose just as the last thing, just to show it, we'll make a sphere, change it to an icosahedron, T for scale, and instead of using this plane, let's drop this in, and hopefully that works. Yeah, so now you can see I've got a volume here, and now this is a big blob. The remesh, of course, is changing that sphere back into some other geometry that's triangulated, but there you go. It just translated over that, and now we've got some cool mesh transitioning all however we want. And keep in mind, you could, of course, we won't do it, but the plane effector is currently viewing a random field, but we could make a linear fall off, a spherical fall off, have anything kind of translate inside of this that we want to, and that would all continue to work. All right, save that one, and I'll see if there are new questions. Anything going on in the chats? The field order is reversed. It's a stack. You think of the field list. Think of the field list like Photoshop. So it's like, here's the bottom layer, the next layer, the next layer, the next layer. So they all calculate like Photoshop, which, yeah, I think most things do. Like the old, like noise, well, the material layer shader was the same thing stacked on top. So yeah, it's always on top. Jaspal, actually, I've got a old... Jaspal is asking about making a car rig that you can control with a keyboard like a game. I'm not going to tackle that right now by itself because, oh man, does that exist? I think it does. Although it might have been on Grayscale Gorilla and they took off a lot of their old videos. Let me see. Half res flight simulator. Looks like it might have been taken down. I might need to go and track that video down. Dang it. I made a flight simulator with dynamics inside of Cinema 4D years ago, like 8 years ago. But it doesn't look like the video is currently alive on the internet right now. So we'll have to track that down or bug Grayscale Gorilla to get that back up. Good question, though. Goosums, nice name. How would you go about instancing a large amount of objects while masking them using noise? So, okay, you want, for example, height field maps to control the instancing of plants on terrain. Fine question, and we can actually use some of the new objects in the content browser, perhaps, to talk about this. Well, does a height map work like that in Cinema? I don't know that it does. I guess I could force it. So if I were to generate a plane, and it's going to have to be probably pretty large. So we'll say 4,000 by 4,000. We don't need too many polygons. So I'll do 55, 55. And so now I got a big old plane. Displace that, and we'll use the plane as a deformer this time. deform the points. They're going to push up not on Y. I want to push up on Z. Let's go 500 because it's pretty big. And then we will control this entirely via fall off. So I could feed in a. I guess I might want a shader field. I don't know. Let's possibly do this the wrong way before we do it. Hopefully a good way. I will increase the noise of this random field until I can start seeing some consistency. It's pretty large now. We could always change the noise type to something not so basic. Something like Voronoi might be nice for getting, some more like hill looks. That could get inverted. We go to remapping and invert it. Bloop. And then we get these nice little hilly bumps. And then creating a second fall off. In this case, we could do spherical, but let's do a box field, T for scale, and increasing this until we're about the size of our overall object. Go to a top view so I can do it very precisely, or approximately precisely. And that box field can now mask and or multiply on top of it. And now the hills only exist in the center and they'll slowly fade away, which is nice. Let's push this up further. I'll just drag it. And now we get some hills. So you want to generate plants. And in this case, the idea is we'd want plants to perhaps generate only up on the highest points of each hill. So we could clamp that somehow. And how do we get that to be fast and optimized? Well, we'll see. Optimizing is something that is tricky to just do on a whim here. It's more like something you test and tinker with until you get it. But let's I'll say fast cloning. Now there is if you're using Octane, everybody loves their Octane scatter. And I've seen some pretty impressive things from, somebody help me in the chat. What is there's some scatter plugin and it seems like it does a pretty good job. But let's do it in vanilla cinema to whatever degree that we can. I want to clone a whole bunch of things all over the place. So jumping into the browser, we can go into volume objects 2, plants. And I really love these grass elements. One moment. Inside here, I'll grab low resolution just so we can have more control. And I will grab, there's dandelions, but I'm going to go to the object after the dandelions and grab everything that comes after it because there's a lot of really nice grass elements in here. And this is why I made everything so large, is because I think these are real world scale. Actually, I might have made everything too large. No, that's not too bad. So now we've got all these grass elements. So you see all of them have been created. I can create a cloner, grab all of those, make them children of the cloner. I want to clone onto an object. The object is going to be this plane. And currently it's cloning 20 of them onto the surface. And let's check what the rotation is, which is not correct. So we could say don't align clone, and it'll just put them back to their original orientation. Or we could manually rotate them. I'm actually fine turning off the align for this particular instance. And we can start increasing our count and getting more. Now, let's see how far we can start pushing this until we start chugging. So you can see I've got my FPS right here. And when it's really low, my FPS is up at 200-ish. As I start increasing it, you're going to see my FPS is going to start dropping. So you can see it's starting to get relatively low. And it's still fine, but if I start increasing the amount, it's going to go further and further down. So now I'm trying to create 14,000 objects, which maybe, hopefully, wasn't too far. It's a dangerous number, so I will drop it back down just for a moment. Because what we do want to do is change this mode. Hang on. Typing in 14,000 in this mode was a dangerous thing. So it will wake up, but I just have to give it a moment. Lab works. Surface spread. Thank you, V Ruckus. Surface spread is the plugin I'm talking about. And yeah, it's a good one. There we go. Nope. I thought it refreshed. There we go. Haha. Okay, so currently it's set to model mode instance. I'm going to change this to multi-instance, and it should be able to handle these way quicker. So let's start increasing my amount here. And you can see, hopefully, well, I'm increasing it. We're already past 1,000. Now we're getting to below 30 frames. But let's see if I can, let's go up to 10,000. And now you see they appeared pretty quick. Let's go up to 100,000. And it appeared pretty quick. Like, that's not bad. So you have to give it that moment to kind of cache the mesh. But now that's cached. Actually, is that the thing? There's this highlighting that happens. I think it slows everything down. But yeah, so I've got these selected. You can see my camera is striking a little bit because of how many there are. And honestly, this is as fast as we can get something to clone kind of out of the box, because it's just there's a lot of geometry here that's being generated. So now let's see about starting to limit these to a hill, just so that we're running quicker. I will drop this by an order of magnitude, and let's start limiting to various things. Now, we could limit just to the height very easily, but I think what I'd like to do is add a plane effector. And then if this works, I don't know, because I maybe do have an idea if we've got this height field. Currently it's pushing everything on the position. I'm going to say don't push it down. I want to scale it down, but let me think. Because what I actually want to do is turn on visibility. That's the actual key here, is turning off visibility will do its best to not generate the object at all. So typically a workflow we might do is turn on a uniform absolute scale and say -1, and it's going to scale everything down to -1. And then turning on the fall off, I could feed in the same random field, and everything is going to get generated everywhere. And it's scaling them down based on this random field. Now, I think the scale of these is probably different. So what I'd probably want to do is take my scale of this noise and make it like as infinitely tall as I can, adding a bunch of numbers here. There we go. So by making this noise like infinitely tall, you can see that these are actually getting skinnier as they go up higher, and these get really small up there. But of course, this is a smooth transition from one side to the other. So we need to do some sort of clamping. But also you'll see that this plane effector is just scaling them down. Instead of scaling them down, let's turn that off and try, I don't know if this will work, but yeah, if we turn on visibility, it is a or B. It's cutting off, I think, at the 50% mark. And now you can see that this is only generating on the peaks, and it's because it's being fed the same noise. And the same noise, as you can almost see, like this hill is stopping at the halfway mark of its overall height. And that seems to be getting applied pretty much correctly. I guess we might want to take the box field into consideration as well, because that's making these fall off, and I think these would have been taller heights otherwise. But we can remap this value via a curve. So if I were to make a curve here, we could start pulling this up and down, and you can see I can spread these out or move them up near the top. Now, as I said, actually, this is a good test here. You can see as I start dragging this and it generates more. Do you see how my FPS, look at my little, I know it's tiny, but look at this FPS right here. By turning on the visibility, this is actually generating fewer objects. Those don't exist. So as I make more of them, you're going to see it's going to slow down. And as I make less of them, it speeds back up again. So we are actually making fewer. We're not scaling it. If we scale them down to 0, they still exist. They're just really tiny. But by using visibility, they're actually disappearing. And so we are limiting to these different areas, making them a little bit, they're just simply not generating. So having done that, we could go back and add another 0 here. And all of those clones are still existing in, well, their calculations are as if all of them were around as far as where these are getting placed. But these are, I think it might even be internally that instead of them existing as a piece of geometry, like all of this textured geometry, it just exists as like an invisible null is what I think it actually ends up being. So yeah, so that is a way of limiting here. Now I arbitrarily chose to make a random noise. We could have generated this via an image-based material, projecting it. Actually, a two-dimensional material might have been a really nice way of going as well. I don't know if you can. I don't think we can generate a noise as a two-dimensional material, but that should pretty much do it. Gumbo, that's funny. Let's see. Anyway, well, these are, if I turn this off, I mean, they're very tiny. I probably shouldn't have made it quite as small, but you see all this geometry is being generated. We get these nice plants going. Grabbing that cloner, I could add in a random effector. Don't affect the position, but I do want to affect the scale. It doesn't have to be, well, we'll do uniform, and I'll do a 0.5, so they can be tinier or bigger. Turn on rotation, and we'll do a 360-degree spin. That was not the correct axis. 360. Maybe because I didn't align the spline. That's not the orientation I'm expecting. There we go. That's now fully spinning. And typically I would let these tilt like 5, 10 degrees. So now you can see they're all tilting all over the place a little bit based on their original orientation to give us more variation. And they're still really small, but let's go crazy and add another 0 on here. So we're generating 1,000,000 clones. And I don't expect to be fast, but that wasn't too bad. And you can now see that even in my viewport, that is not running horribly. And you look at the amount of geometry you have. How many versions, like if we went back 2 or 3 versions of Cinema, like this would have been insane to even think about. But now it works. Now it works quite well. And this is actually pretty dang populated as far as this grass is concerned. And in R23, they added all these nice new grass elements. Some of them were there, but there's all these new like tall ones that didn't used to be. So yeah, that should work. I'll drop this count down another order of magnitude just to save it for Patreon, just to be safe with that. But yeah, okay, that seems to have covered what Goosums was asking about. Carson Jones, actually that would have been a good idea. Carson is saying, where I was saying we couldn't make a 2-dimensional noise, we could have fed this into a vertex map. We would have to make the plane editable, but we could have fed into a vertex map, and then that vertex map, we could have remapped things via that. I like the idea of that. Let's just spend a second to do it because it will not take long. I'll turn off the cloner momentarily. We'll save this as another version and make it editable. By the way, I've reported that vertex map as a bug because I thought it'd be fixed in R23, but apparently they were not aware of it. So that has been officially reported because, yeah, we need those vertex maps. So select vertex weight set to 0. This nice vertex map, which is a vertex map, if you don't know, is a tag that is assigning every point of value somewhere between 0 and 1 or 0 and 100%. And that's all this tag is. It's storing a value. So I want to use fields. I don't want to freeze. I do want to use this random field and this box field. And now you can see that those are being mapped on. So then this plane is currently getting mapped via this box field and this random field. But now I could say, no, you are actually being mapped via this vertex map. Make sure that this vertex map has the box field set to multiply. I also said that we could do it with a mask. So this random field could be masked by the box field. It does the same thing. The effective same thing. And now we get the hills here, and this is translated into a vertex map. And because we're in a vertex map now, we could limit things via that. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, well, this plane could be. So turning this cloner back on again, we can go into this the plane, which was being fed that same random field, but instead it can be fed that vertex map. So it's getting the end result of the vertex map, which is going to behave pretty much exactly the same way. We could remap here with these offsets, which, yeah, that's the box field. That one I don't need to change, but we're feeding in this vertex map. There we go. We could go to enable remapping and do a lot of remapping directly here. So I could start cropping this up just inside of it directly. And you can see how this is spreading really nicely here. So the vertex map was a superior option as far as getting that spreading what looks to be a little bit more organically, because it's seeing it 2-dimensionally via this point information. So we could remap it via this inner strength, but we also have the curve we could turn back on again. And the curve can be used the exact same way we did before. Scooting this up will increase it. And of course we can use this curve to manipulate it as well. And yeah, something that could be nice would be you could remap the vertex map in 2 times. One to be controlling a plane that's controlling if they exist or not, and another one that could be mapped slightly differently. That could be maybe making them scale a little bit on an edge. So yeah, there's always a lot of options there. So I just wanted to show this alternative method because I do like vertex maps, and that is now there. Okay, give that a save as another version. Jump back to the chat and see if there's more questions. Yeah, lab works. Uh-oh. Gumbo, that sounds intimidating. There's a different growth. Actually, Gumbo, you asked what Cosmozeb? I don't think has ever asked a question before, so I'll... and then Burnwolf, I'll try and take a look at yours next. but I'm going to try and click on names I don't recognize. Spread the love around. So we've got a flower growth in C4D. The question is how to make this growth. First of all, who made this and is it a tutorial? No, it's just an animation. Kismet Era. Let's see what we've got here. No audio, please. Hit play. Bling. Ooh, nice. Oh, they're doing a little bit of a demo here. So I don't want to reference their thing too specifically because they're even showing it off there a bit. So, ooh, look, Rocket Lasso is streaming live. Look at that. So let's try, I'm going to try opening up this time-lapse flower opening, and let's look at some real-life reference. Oh, that looks like it's CG as well. Yeah, that's also CG. I thought it was a real-life time-lapse of a plant. Here we go. Time-lapse flowers. I gotta be really careful because sometimes, even without audio, sometimes YouTube will be like, "Oh, that's copyrighted." Actually, I don't charge. I don't monetize my videos anyway, so I don't care. Okay, so let's see if there is a particularly nice. Ooh, there we go. Blink, blink, blink. That was cool. So that's at 20%. Let's try that one. Oh, there's a lot of different flowers. Okay, this is amazing reference. Ooh, that's a nice looking one. Let's look at this one. Yeah, it's already a little bit open when we get there, but always go to real life sources when you can. Yeah, see, that stuff gets super crazy. Like, you know, how much is happening here, because obviously there's in real life, this is doing a bunch of collisions. Like all these are layers and they can't intersect each other. Now, and then, yeah, so we can't do that, but that's pretty cool looking. Now, if we want to not, ooh, yeah, look at all these different ones. They're so cool. Now, there's that's kind of, this is kind of your generic one I think a lot of us think of, where it's like, okay, there's a couple of petals and then they bend outward. Ooh, and then here's a rose. Look at all this. This is a great reference. I'll make sure to link this in the description when I post this properly. No, it's not a rose. Daisies. Some of them skip into like a little bit later. Ooh, there we go. Sort of a tulip thing. But which one did a good job for us? This one. So yeah, let's sort of use this as our reference. I'll scoot this to the other screen. New file. Now, this is not... I'm trying to think of the way it was done in that reference animation. They were very quick, and you can get away with a lot when things are moving quickly, and there's a lot of them because you're getting an overall impression of them as a whole instead of them individually. So there is a layer where I would say don't stress out too much about the very, very specifics of it if you're going to be seeing it in a greater context. If you're going to do a super close-up, obviously you need to worry about it. However, let's start out by creating a let's create a couple of subdivisions here. I always like them to be kind of square-esque. Then I'll create a taper, and you can see some new R23 features where you can actually see the orientations of this, which is nice. Rotate -90, drop it inside, fit to parent, and now I can increase my, oh, it looks like, I thought, that might be a bug. Oh, there's an alignment now? Oh, interesting. Give me a second. Undo, undo, undo. Put it in, and then alignment. So now if I say Z plus and fit to parent, oh, that's not the way, it doesn't behave the way I thought, but that seems fine. Fit to parent is now based on this alignment instead of the rotation you happen to have dragged it towards. So that's fine. All right. So yeah, we could taper it that way and then create a bend and make it a parent after, or make a child after the taper. I want this one to be on X plus and fit to parent. And now a lot of people, I do agree, it would be nice if a bend could bend to both directions. So if we were to bend this up like that, if I wanted to go both ways, yeah, that would be nice. But if we look at the height right now, which is, or I guess it's this width, is 129. If we scoot this off to the side, and I put that to that exact amount divided by 2, then this will actually bend only half of it, but we could say that the mode is set to unlimited, and you'll see it actually bends both ways. A couple extra steps, but you can do it. I would like this to have another bend segment right there. That's fine. All right, so now that's bending up. Now it could actually be, it's fine, but keep in mind that we can use fall offs on these. So I could go under fall off, create a linear field, set the linear field to the proper orientation. In this case, let's say Z minus. I always get it backwards. Z plus. So now you can see that I can actually make this fade out as it heads towards the back here and flatten it out down there. So we've got options like that. Alrighty. Then we need another bend. So let me make a duplicate of that. Don't use the field. Maybe I should have made it from scratch. I'll just reset this. Go to Z plus, fit to parent, increase, and change my rotation to -90. There we go. So you can see it's spinning upward. So now we've kind of modeled out this petal to whatever degree. And that is good. And we could keyframe these various things to make this petal unravel. So I'm thinking something like that. Putting this entire petal, I want to move it 100 or 200 units off to the right, because then if I make a null, that's pivoting from the center point, and that can go inside. Excellent. And that can be put into a cloner. So let's save it and then put it into the cloner. Flower open. Okay, so yeah, that's going to be the petal. And actually, here's an important question. Oh, you guys have not been seeing the mouse the entire time. Here's a new official thing. Whenever I'm live streaming, if you do not see my mouse in there, let me know, because I've been trying to do this thing where I make the mouse bigger. And there we go. Now you should see the mouse. Yeah, now I got a nice big mouse. So always yell at me if it's not showing up the mouse. So now you can see that we're pivoting from the 0 point. Yeah, we should do that, Ninja Cran. All right, so that's a petal. It's pivoting from this one spot, and I could take it and rotate it and offset it from here as well, which is nice. In fact, we might put that into a second null. We'll see in a moment. So I'll put this into a cloner, and we will begin to spin it. We'll do a radial. Now we can make as many of these as we want. How many were in the reference? We'll kind of aim for that. So 1, 2. That's okay. There's 6 in the reference, I think. So we'll make 6 of them. And they do layer up on top of each other. I will zero this out so there's 0 radius. And I don't want to see all of the deformers showing up, so I'll hide them. So you can see I've got 6 of them. But I want them to step out from each other a bit. So I will make a step effector. Yeah, we'll make a step effector. And the step effector will push out the position Z, I think. Yeah, so now you can see that each one is pushed out a little bit more than the one before it. Now, what's cool about this is if we were to make a lot of copies and start spinning this around more, then this could get interesting. Let me show you. Let's go overboard. Let's say 60 copies here. So now you see I've got a lot of flower petals, but now you can very distinctly see how the step effector is pushing each one out a little bit more than the one before, and we get the spiral. And if we were to take our end angle and start increasing this more and more, we could spiral them around and around and around and around, and you start getting these like really nice layouts. Now, I kind of just arbitrarily scaled this up. There is a very specific number you can type in, like the Fibonacci sequence. I forget what the number is. Yeah, I forget the number. I did a presentation about it one time, but I'm blanking on it right now. But yeah, you can see how you can get these overlapping really nice. And that could be interesting. Now, I mean, I know in some ways I kind of like having a whole bunch of them like this, but if we go back to our original reference, we put that back to here, put this back to the default of 360. Actually, they do spin around twice, so I will say ×2. Actually, I guess ×2 isn't great. I'll just eyeball it. So we'll just, that spins around once, but I want them to spin around like that. There we go. Not quite what I'm expecting. Might be more math to it. Because, yeah, I definitely feel like they should overlap each other a little bit more than once for the way they lay out. Yeah, actually, it's probably something more like they all spin around enough times, but it's going to be really hard to... There's a, like I said, there's a mathematical number that would be correct, but something like that. Actually, that seems all right. So now they've offset each other a little bit. Now, that step could also be scaling a little bit, which could be helpful. Now you see it gets bigger and bigger and bigger as it spins around. We don't want to go that much, so I can just say like 0.1 to get a little bit bigger. So if I were to put this petal into another null, Alt-G to essentially group it, and this one will become petal, and this one becomes rotate. I can now hit R for rotate and spin this, I think, on the X. Yeah, so now you see as I do this, we can get those to open up like so. Now, I don't, well, yeah, we don't have like all day to spend on this thing. So let's do the simple version, which will be, we will keyframe this. So what should it look like at the beginning? I think in the beginning, we'll have it be pretty closed. But we have to get the proper rotation. Now, oh man, there's so many layers to this, because if we were to rotate our original bend deformer, we can actually make it offset the way it bends. Like things can bend further at the tip than at the beginning, like so. So you can see that becomes a little bit better the way it's encapsulated. And just for your reference, you can now see that this bend is offset from the original plant by rotating it. But that enabled, you see how it's not a straight curve anymore. It's kind of got a little bit of an angle to it. Does this have a radius? Oh, they are pushing out from each other. So I guess they do increase slightly. Also, these probably should taper at the bottom as well. We can do that pretty easily. Copy that taper and set it to Z minus. Yeah, and I can taper on that other end as well. And now I can set the strength to whatever I want. Yeah, that's a little bit better. So that is all tapered in a little bit. So at the beginning, it will have this rotation. So I'll record that. And importantly, it'll have this bend. This is another super important number for us right there. So I will record the strength of that bend. Now, we'll go not too far. Let's say 15 frames. 15 frames in, I will rotate this and have it taper out a bit. Not too much, like that, perhaps. And record. And then grab the bend. And we probably want these to be offset, but for now, not the rotation, the strength. So I'll have these bend out. And we could even bend them down a little bit. That could be fun. So those will do that. So now we should have a very basic, like, okay, they all just open. Not terribly interesting. So, also, it's hard to tell, but you see how they're overlapping here. Remember we had this bend to have the fall off? We could actually probably fix this by, yeah, if I pull that fall off I made in, then we can actually fix that quite a bit. Also, we can fix that via the cloner transform. We can add in a little bit of base rotation. Let me show you that one. Yeah, if we just do a little bit like that, then we can get them to spin and offset and not be intersecting quite so badly. All right, that probably will still look okay. Yeah, so that's still looking okay when they're all collapsed. Now, this is where it gets really fun, is because we save it, and the cloner is currently saying all of them should offset at the exact same time, but we can create a new, I'm going to make a new one, a new step effector. And we'll rename this one animated. And this will not affect the scale, but it will affect the time offset. So let's say I want a time offset of 5 frames. Now when I hit play, okay, it's going to be backwards. So I'll just do it correctly right away. I will invert the spline. So flip horizontally. So now the strength of these is being mapped. And now you can see, just from a couple frames, look at that. The outermost petal is moving couple of frames before the next one is. So now, hitting play, you see that they actually opened in sequence. So having done that, the more space we put between these, let's say 15, you can now see that we can separate out the layers of motion from them. Now, we don't need to go too far. Just by doing like 5, they can each get that little bit of independent life on them. And that's actually not too bad. I like that. In addition, we could do the same thing with random. So the random will not affect the position, but it will do a little bit of time offset. Let's say 3. So now it'll add in a little bit of like randomness in addition to that. So they're not all perfectly matching. Now you can see each one layers out. Yeah, I mean, that's the basic setup. It obviously be a good idea to do things like this bend. It should do a little bit of overlapping animation. So that's kind of, turn off the cloner. This will flap out, but instead, let's say go another 10 frames, record the strength, and I'll go back here and let's actually, that's where I want it to end. So this one, I'll tell it to overshoot a bit, and then it can ricochet back up a little shallow, eventually settling to where I wanted it to be. And that last one can maybe be a couple extra frames. So let's see if that looks better. Boing. Just that little bit. You see, just that little bit of overlapping animation. Little springy. And that should carry through automatically to all of them. Yeah, just that little bit of wobble. Nice. And because of the way it's set up, we probably have a decent amount of freedom to do things like increase the number of petals. Now, keep in mind, we did do this extra angle, so we have to keep that in mind. But this should like layer up, and you'll see that they all will spiral out. Going back to the original step, giving this some Y position so that the inner ones, okay, actually down. I'm going to go negative Y. So each subsequent one is a little bit bigger, but it's also down a little bit further. And if we do it properly, yeah, well, you see if I push it down a lot, that they'll be layered up really nicely so they're not intersecting in the end. And we just have to make sure that they're scaled enough in the earlier state here so they're not intersecting too badly. They are a little bit, and let's see, I guess the scale might be the property. Yeah, if I scale these up more, you can see that the scales are kind of compensating for it and getting larger. I don't know if that's a too good. Actually, it's not bad. So yeah, now they're not intersecting too badly in the beginning or at the end. And all of this is without doing any kind of physics simulations or any soft bodies or anything. And they all layer up quite nicely. And yeah, make those different flowers. I mean, obviously a regular flower would have the, all the pollen stuff inside and the stamen and the, we could build all those individually. I wonder, this is just for fun, because essentially that's answering the question as far as I was planning on going. But I do wonder if we were to, I will even bundle all these together. So now this is a flower. Select the cloner and everything that made that one, put it inside there. What would happen if we made a cloner of the flowers and we make a whole collection of them? Let's do the simple version to start out with. Oops. Separate these out a little bit further. Actually, let's do a honeycomb. Aha. 5 by 5, please, because there is a lot of them. There we go. That looks kind of nice. So can I offset these after that fact? Because right now all of them will be doing identical things to each other. Now we could, I mean, you can fix that a lot just by using something like a random. And let's not randomize the position. But as soon as I take this rotation and give it a 360-degree rotation, then I guess I was that rotation before. Or maybe it's just H. But now you can see that each of them is spun differently. So that goes a long way. And then if you took scale, do a uniform scale, do another 0.25 perhaps, and just scale them a little bit differently. That's going to go a long way to making them look different. The main thing I'm interested in is, can I add another random, and can I offset the animation? So let's just go really big so it's hard to miss, say 25. I'm not sure. But I don't know that this will work at all anyway. Did that get applied? Probably. Yeah. No, that doesn't seem to offset them. However, that's not necessarily the end of that, because if we wanted these all to go at different times, I wonder if we could still do it in the original cloner. Yeah, let's check this out. So that didn't work for using that random factor. But if we go back to the original one, it is being cloned multiple times. So if I were to add a let's do a plane. No, I'll do the random still. I'll add a random effector. Don't affect the position. Yes, affect the time. And once again, I'll do a lot. Let's say 222. That is a lot. And right now, every single petal is being affected, I think. So randomly, they all moved at the same time. That's not encouraging. But I'm going to say don't be random, be based on noise. And I want there to be 0 animation speed. And I want there to be pretty big scale. Hey, look at that. So what is happening now is I put a gigantic noise in here, and the noise is so big that each individual petal, they're really close to each other, so they're all being affected the same. But this one is further from that one, so it's not being affected at the same time. So now you can see that each plant, kind of as a whole, is getting separated by this giant, like, random time offset. If we chill that out a little bit, then they should be a little bit more together, and they'll each spread out and do their own thing. Ding, 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 ding. So that's kind of one way of doing it. There's a lot of ways of layering this stuff up. I'll save this as another version because it's pretty cool. Now that's using this random. Let's see. Before I clone it, let's look at a slight concept here, and that is it's a setting we almost never talk about. Under transform, do you see how there's an animation mode play? That means it's automatically playing all the animations that are fed into it. If I were to say fixed, then now it is not moving at all. Time is not flowing forward. Time has now become whatever we feed into it. Now, we did feed in a time. We are feeding in these time offsets. However, if I were to put in a plane, don't affect anything except for time, and I'm going to go 100, so it's pretty blatant. Give this a fall off, linear fall off. It's even got color on there. And I drag this to be bigger. This is now a fall off. We are now controlling time with this fall off. So you can see how that will transition out as if this is essentially time moving forward. So here's our 90 frames mapped from, well, it's 100 frames mapped from there to there. Now our animation is only taking out 25 frames. So you can see that probably this finishes animating. Well, here's where things get interesting. Right there, you see it stopped animating right there, and visually, that is on our fall off right around there. So it's what, little less than a third, like about a quarter of the way. Yeah, almost exactly a quarter of the way. Let's go look at our keyframes. If I go back to the thing that we keyframe the most, look, we keyframed it up about a quarter of the way. So you can see how those correlate to each other. So if we had stretched this animation all the way to our full timeline, then that would be mapped to that. So yeah, pretty cool to be able to do that as well. Now this has color applied because it's not stretched to the entire thing. You see it didn't get applied. I wonder if we could trim. Can we trim that? I don't know. I'm going to go to Window, Timeline. I'm always blind on Timeline, Dope Sheet. And yeah, there is our animated objects. Now, is there not a time track? We used to have a concept of a time track. Maybe that's not a thing anymore. Because I don't see a bar. Yeah, it seems just a straight line there. That's interesting. Yeah, I'd have to think about that a little bit more. But yeah, we could map that in different ways. But mainly, I could take this animation. Right now, the easiest way would probably be to take this animation, stretch the entire thing to match our entire timeline. And, oh, I didn't grab the rotation. Stretch that as well. So now that should match a little bit more one-to-one. So now, or not. Oh yeah, I had to refresh it. Didn't seem to refresh right away. Now you can see this is mapping a lot more to the 100% because I stretched the timeline there. I just did that because now we can kind of control the color as well. But that is feeding into this very first cloner, which means if I make multiple clones, this linear field is still relative for each of them individually, which means I can take this, and as I transition, each one individually is going to do their transition out. And that is pretty cool. So this is how you could imagine cloning these onto, I suppose we could do it. What's a not ugly thing we could do? Let's make I don't have signal for R23 here. So I'll just draw a spline. I was going to trace a wiggling line, but it's pretty easy to just say line, line, line. Good enough. And we'll give it some 3 dimensions, not much of them. All right, so select, sweep, end side, T for scale. Caps, we don't need no caps. Object, details, scale. Scale it down. That's fine. I kind of want it the other way, so I'll just select my spline. Select the entire spline, right click, and point order, reverse sequence. So there we go. Now the branch is moving upward. And now we could add a few extra sides to this. Let's say 12. Cloner. This will clone, not honeycomb, but clone onto an object. The object will be this. Each of these is getting cloned. Not quite the correct rotation. That's fine. It's probably going to be this one. -90. Now they're all aimed outward. There are a set amount of them. These are not going to get distributed very well by default. So I'll just click a random seed a few times until we get something reasonable. See, now, see, this one works. Now, here's a, we haven't used it yet, but the new plugin from Rocket Lasso, I could be like, okay, I like the look of that one. I don't want to lose this one. So how about I add in a recall tag? So that's the new plugin. If you have recall installed, you can right click and say, I want to recall that, and double click to store it. And now I've stored that state, and now I'm free to keep on trying different seeds. And it's like, oh, that's a good one. It's like, oh, that one's good. Let's make a copy of the recall tag and override it. And I could be like, which one do I like better? This one? And then double click this one to be like, that one, that one, that one, that one. It's like, I like this one better. So you can see that's what currently the one selected. So that's what we're on. I could just click on it and say remove all recall tags or delete them. And now this is the final state. So that's a very, very quick use for recall. Okay, having done that, now we could just grab our linear field and spin it to be the correct orientation. And there we go. Give that a save as C. Drag this across. Bing, 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 bing. And they'll each animate out based on that. Pretty fun. These look like they want to be pushed out a little bit further. Easy enough to do. Transform, push out on Z. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I think let's put a keyframe on that just for anybody who's using the scene file from Patreon. So this will start out there. Linear, position, keyframe, and fast forward to the end. Blip, 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 blip. Blip, blip. Keyframe that. So now hitting play. That should nicely transition one to the other. Each of the pedals is slightly randomized. They go in sequence, but they also get driven by this overall time as well. Nice. Okay, save that, and let's check out the chat. Time Lords. Low tech. Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I have to play with that quite often. I think I did a SIGGRAPH presentation about controlling time, but back then I didn't realize that there was an animation mode. So I actually would create Xpresso to counter animate, so then I could reanimate it, which is kind of funny. Let me check the chat, see if there's follow-up questions here. Dennis, yeah, 137.5. That sounds correct. Would have been the Fibonacci sequence to type in. So every pedal would rotate 137.5, and there's like infinite decimals on that, and then they would create like a perfect spiral pattern. The delay effector, the delay effector, I am curious if the delay effector can affect time. I feel like there's a good chance it wouldn't, but that could could work. Now, actually, and I think when you're asking the question, it's going back probably quite a few minutes, but I want to see if it does. Yeah, see, it doesn't. The delay factor can't affect time. And even if it could affect time, which it doesn't, then it would just be our animation hitting its endpoint and then ricocheting back. It wouldn't overshoot it. So, yeah, that's a thing. Let's see. Actually, I'm going to do a thing where I'm answering my own question. Okay, here's a new idea. This is sort of a pitch. This is a plan where every time I do one of these main live streams beforehand, what I want to do is have spent just a little bit of time and figure out some sort of quick tip. I want to come up with a quick tip and be like, okay, cool. During a live stream, I'm going to be like, hey, everybody, here's this nice little quick tip. And then I can take that quick tip and clip it out later and then make a whole collection of quick tips that each came. So that's the idea right now. I haven't gotten to make the little animation and or anything graphic for it except for this Rocket Lasso quick tip, but I'll definitely make this fancier. So we're going to do a quick tip section here. I'll pop it back up on screen in just a moment. First, I've got to pull up the proper scene file so I can show it. That is not the file I wanted. How about that one? That's the one I want. All right. So, okay. Let's see how efficient. I'm going to make this up as I go, but this is the idea is I'm doing these. Let's see. What's the best way to show this? Hang on, I will pop up back up on the screen. I haven't forgotten. I just want to make sure I've got the. Yeah, it's a fine place to start. All right, so let's see how quick I can do this. Here we go. Rocket Lasso quick tip. So I guess I'll just do the screen here. So. Here's the very first Rocket Lasso quick tip. This is a model of a milk crate that I began, and I'm using Recall. You don't need to use Recall, but this new plugin from Rocket Lasso where I was going through modeling this milk crate, and here's sort of the end result, but I want to go further and do some additional things. But just to show it off, I can see every single state by clicking on my different Recall tags that I went through to start modeling this as I went through and started changing it. Now, what has happened is I changed a whole bunch of, I cleaned up the geometry so they became n-gons, but n-gons don't like beveling that well. And there's a lot of cleanup that I have to do. So you'll see that I kept on pushing this further and further until eventually I got to this step. But the quick tip specifically is I want to talk about cleaning up this type of geometry. And I don't know that this is the super duper duper proper way of doing things, but I think it's kind of neat. If we go to this geometry, what I want to do is turn this mess of triangles into quads somehow. I want these to be quads. So in this case, I would select all of these and melt them. The shortcut is U-Z, and now those have melted away. Hitting the letter I for inner extrude. If I do an inner extrude here, then I can pull these in, and now you can see I get that nice little straight edges everywhere. Some of those will overlap, but that's fine. Now, something that's good here is if we're beveling, these are all perfectly lined up with their edge, so they'll bevel very nicely. Now that I've done this inner extrude, though, I could do something like melt the messy edge away. So selecting these, melt again, U-Z. So now we get this cleaner one. And we can start erasing out unnecessary polygons by hitting M-E for the polygon pen tool and pinching this down to these corners. So by doing that inner extrude, I could pull these to the equivalent corners, and you can now see that I've reduced the poly count inside of that. Now, in this particular case, I guess I welded those differently before. Now that I say it, I've got the whole setup there. I'm going to backtrack. I'll do a little edit there. Because in this case, I'm going to hit I for inner extrude, pull this in a little bit. It's fine if there's a little bit of overlapping. And in this case, I might say M-E for polygon pen tool and start blending a bunch of these points together that I don't need. I guess I probably should cover that other part. Apologies. Hit I for inner extrude, pull these in. Now, the first thing you'll see that's nice about this inner extrude is we get these nice 45-degree edges on these hard corners, and everything is relative to the angle that the edges were traveling in. So that's really nice for beveling. In this case, I'd hit M-E for the polygon pen tool and start blending some of these extra points together. And this is going to be a nice way of beginning to erase out some quads. if I hit I for inner extrude again, I can pull in, and you can now see I've reduced the number of polygons because that one is now gone. Having done this, I could select these edges, hit U, Z, and melt those down. And then hitting ME for polygon pen tool again, I could pull this into the corner and just kind of keep on erasing out that one inner edge. And now I've turned all of these into quads, except for this one, which I could select and melt. And that's melted away. And now you can see that these are all quads, and all of them have their original edge coming in from the corner to give us really nice bevels. And we've just erased all of that out, being only quads. Yeah, complex pole cleanup. Yeah, I don't talk about that stuff too much. Yeah, sorry, that wasn't super smooth, but still thought it was neat information. I've been doing a lot of that on this model, trying to like clean up the various edges, trying to make as many quads as possible. And it's really interesting to try and keep edges clean and make it so that bevels are, that it likes bevels. And I think I've gotten to the point where like this handles all the bevels really nicely. But there's probably still more cleanup to do. It's amazing how much time you can sink into something as simple as this. As like, actually, I guess it was during one of the bonus live streams where I was talking about, I wanted to get a collection of objects that could be not spheres. So like the not sphere. And so a milk crate was one of my not spheres. And yeah, we make a clone of that for them. And then we get our nice beveled milk crate. Doo-doo-doo. Yeah, this model will become available once it's done. Especially relevant because when I have my recall read-only come out, then even people who don't have recall would be able to download the scene file and still recall all these things. They just wouldn't be able to store new ones. So that's part of the idea. Anyway, we'll see how that goes. I might have to practice those more beforehand if we're going to record them properly. So, yep, that was a practice run. We'll see how that goes in the future. I guess because we've been talking about recall a bit, I'm going to play the recall ad, and then we'll start taking more questions. So be right back, everybody. There we go. That's recall. At least that's the recall advertisement. Yeah, we'll work that in whenever it's relevant, but I'm not going to force it in unnaturally into different scene files. Do you know the borrowed edge method? Maybe. I don't know. Send me a link about it, Jeremy. If you're on the Slack channel, send me a link. Or add it in the big channel so everybody can see it. But I hate watching somebody else's clip or tutorial and then being like, oh, make mine. It's like, I don't do that. So I tend not to watch too many tutorials. Let's see. Yeah, Burn Wolf. I said I was going to tackle yours. So let's go ahead and click your link and see how that goes. Before we do, Jeremy is asking if I'd figure out how to save and share scene node rigs. I haven't done it. I haven't actively done it, but Rick had said that you can save a scene node locally, or I think it's just saved in the scene file. So yeah, if I make a scene file, I can just save the scene file. It opens as a scene file. So yeah, they're super easily shareable. I think I'm going to make a tutorial. Here, let me pop open the scene file. I think I'm going to make a tutorial about making this landscape, but I haven't fully decided yet. It's a tricky thing. It's going to take a moment to, oh, actually, here it is. Open, and then need to change my layout to node layout. There we go. So here is, how do I get to regular nodes? Because these are the material nodes. I don't want a material. Here we go. Yeah, I'm still getting used to like the simple things, but this is really fun. It's actually an extension of what me and Casey had been talking about. And this one's not super duper subdivided, but it looks better and better the more you subdivide it. So if I take geometry, if I feed this, how many subdivisions is this? You don't want to go, yeah, it's only one. Oh, I don't need to do that. I need to do this. Aha. One more subdivision. Boop. That's going to take a little bit to calculate because there's a lot of geometry here. But I'll wait a moment for that to smooth. Yeah, it's a heck of a refresh. You can see why I don't have that up at 4 regularly. There we go. So you see there's a lot of geometry here. In fact, let me show you. Look at how much geo is here. So yeah, that takes a little bit to calculate. So let me just give you a quick tour around this thing. I'll simplify this more so it calculates quicker. But yeah, I'm thinking about making a tutorial about this because I think it's pretty neat. Okay, there we go. Because what's actually happening here is let me show you the overall setup. So here's kind of the setup as it lands right now, but there is more complexity inside of several grouped nodes, specifically in this loop carried value. So there's some stuff going on in here. And then there's also, this is a little rig I put together for displacing geometry. So essentially I made my own displacer using nodes. Like it's doing the math using normals and noises and whatnot. And then I'm using 2 displacers, and then there's a Laplace smoothing setup that was made by Ali. I think that's how you say his name. So I'm not going to go into that one. But the point being is this is taking geometry and doing multiple extrusions of it. So let me show you by skipping that step. I think that should work. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, look at this. Like how cool. Like we can't make this in Cinema right now, and you'll see that this is actually perfectly hollow. There's a series of looped extrusions. And what I'm doing is I'm randomly grabbing a selection of everything and then extruding that selection. And then I'm grabbing a slightly randomized selection based off of that previous one and doing it again and again and again and again. And then after all that's happened, then I am now taking that and displacing the results. Let me feed this in here. It'll take a second. Every step here is going to take a chug because, you see all the geometry and all the loops and everything. And I probably haven't optimized. So now you see I'm displacing it so they get all kind of a little bit randomly changed. And then, like I said, I didn't design this node, but this is doing some Laplacian smoothing. So I feed in that smoothing and it's taking out, it's like a smooth deformer. But of course we can't interact. We can't put a smooth deformer in here. So now it's taking all my geometry and smoothing it. And you end up with this just looking so nice. And I take that, subdivide it, take that subdivided geometry, and then I output that, and that's how I get my final setup. But it would be really easy to tweak seeds or increase the landscape and have it generate and look different in different places here. So just by changing the seed, I can just type in any number, and it's going to take a second because it has to recalculate everything. Let's see how long. And like I said, oh, there we go. See, entirely new landscape generated based on different random noise selections. So I think there's a lot of potential in this type of thing. And this is the furthest I've pushed something. So we'll just see how that ends up going. Let's see. I do want to go and tackle Burnwolf's question. I need to scroll up and find it. Second. Yeah, second and thirded. I've talked about that before. Whenever I'm doing a live stream, if somebody puts a link and I haven't tackled it and you think it's really cool, feel free to second it. And then it's like, okay, people want to see that. I'll make sure to catch it. Whoa. Oh, what's really funny is I've actually gotten this question years ago in the old Ask GSGs. Maybe not literally this one. This is from Maxim. Scret? I'm not sure. Scret is what I'm going to go with. Maxim Scret. Let's see what we got here. Yeah. Ooh, man, that's cool. There's a lot happening there. Yeah, I don't know if this is exactly. I think we've seen similar ones because I remember making a gorilla back in the day. Look at that thing. That's crazy. That's so cool. First of all, this might not be 3D. This might be like an animated illustration. Let's see if there's any description. It's a collaboration and no description to help us out. Having said that, let's think if they're like the way we might go about it. There's two different elements going on here as well. One is the raw modeling, which is going to be the thing that takes a lot of time. And after that, you could spend time colorizing and animating it via different cloner methods. So that's less crazy. Let's go back to our default layout, open up a new scene file, go into the content browser and find ourselves a sculpting base, which is under here. So let's see, what critter is just going to show off the best here? I don't like the dog's geometry. Let's grab the horse. Why not? Hello, horsey. It's just a model we have, and I know everybody has access to this model, so it's something we can go to. Now, it's definitely not the most detailed thing. Okay, the first thing to say is there is no automatic way of doing this at all. It's a very specific and artistic endeavor to go and make something like what we were seeing. Honestly, maybe we'll grab a human face because this just doesn't have as much dimension as I kind of want to see. So let's go and grab a bust here. Let's see if that's a little bit better. Yeah, that's fine. So how would I go about doing this? I got a couple different generic ideas in mind. I'm trying to think of which one I actually want to go with. One would be, can we do some snapping? I'm always fuzzy on this. Let's try drawing some splines straight onto the surface and see if that works for one. So if I were to go to our, I guess the spline tool, and let's try turning on snapping and see if it works. So enable snap. I want to go to polygon snap. I want it to be 3D snapping. What's tool specific snap? I don't even know. That's a dangerous thing to turn on if you don't know what it is. Intersection, midpoint, grid. This might be fine. So, well, you see this actually scrolling around on it all right. I actually don't want to be snapping to points. So that seems a little bit better. Now, here's the thought is we would just be, maybe we do want those, but let's just start out. I don't know, see that, I want to draw a spline. Don't go to point mode. Just let me draw a spline. Oh yeah, I guess we are in some sort of selection mode. I don't know, don't do that. Are these snapping to the surface? Yes, nice. So it looks like it didn't catch the first point, but here is the thought. We need to make that probably X-ray. We don't usually do that. How do you even do it? I almost never do it. Options, X-ray? Yeah, I guess that's something. Spline. Can we stay on one spline? And if we can, would we want to? I don't know. One thing that's really, I'm going to just click. I'm not going to click and drag, so I'm just going to click and start drawing out. It looks like the X-ray went away. I wonder if we could show that somehow. And I think those are snapping. Let's change our display mode to lines. Yeah, those are snapping to it. So that's actually not bad. So I think you would have to, and it is working. Ooh, let's turn on culling, backface culling. There we go. Yeah. So I'm trying to simplify this as much as we can. So now we're not seeing, it's the mesh, but we're not seeing through the back. So this would be a manual process of clicking through and building out a flow of these lines. And every time, oop, that one escaped. I don't know what to make of that. Let's hit undo and see what happened. This one more. So let's try again. It should be snapping, but maybe maybe something with the back face culling it doesn't like. I don't know. Let's Yeah, those are settings. I only use this when I'm like in some sort of hardcore modeling mode, so I don't do these too often. So we're in lines. Hidden line might be helpful, but I kind of like seeing through the mesh. And X-ray is not helping us too much unless it's selected. If it's selected, can we still draw our spline? The points seem to be arbitrarily not snapping to the surface. Now, if we do get a rogue one occasionally, if I just hit E for move, I'm pretty sure if I move this that it is automatically snapping to the mesh. Maybe not. Come on. 3D, tool specific. It's doing an occasionally good job. We could snap to a points, but I really don't want to do that. It's really overbearing. We could say edge snap, which might be a little bit better. So that will force it to an edge. We could snap these to edges, but I don't want to be limited to that. Let's try to continue drawing them. Once again, I don't know. Yeah, see, I don't want edge to snap. I just want to find my own flow here. And I have to be careful and make sure I make points everywhere I think there's like a significant change in the geometry. Let's see, that's frustrating because you see, maybe, did I turn off backface culling? Maybe that's the main culprit because it seemed to work originally. I'm going to delete that one. Select W, delete. Let's see if backface culling is possibly a culprit. I do not know. I'm occasionally accidentally clicking and dragging too long because I'm trying to go relatively fast. Not the biggest deal because we're going to change the spline mode here. We'll see. Hit escape. Yeah, that would work better. So maybe the backface culling is causing trouble for us. A couple of those are passing through the bust a little bit. I'm going to just keep moving forward though. So let's go and draw here. So you'll see that I could keep on. Yeah, that's fine. As it stuff spreads out, I could keep on making more little intermediaries and letting them kind of do this natural flow. And honestly, it's the kind of thing where it's like, this is the kind of thing you could go and like put on a good song or put on a video, put a tutorial on in the background. And then you could just be like, okay, I'm just going to go through and start painting a nice little flow here of where all this geometry seems to go. It'd be nice to change the color of one of the, like the spline or the mesh, because these blue lines are kind of starting to blend together a little bit visually, so it's a little hard to tell. So anyway, you see how I can start going through and drawing more lines, and a lot of stuff goes stylistically, like how long are you going to have to making these? But I don't think it's that bad. I just don't expect the software to do this for you automatically. This is a very sort of artistic-y endeavor. I wonder if we can continue a spline there. I think I could, yeah. Clicking that, I could possibly continue that line. So there's a lot of pretty good freedom here. Now I'll just make one more line here, and then like I'm not going to finish it out because you can see that this might take a while. Even here, like make a little one. And what's nice is like I can just keep on hitting escape, and every time I hit escape, I can start drawing a new line. Escape. Let's make one around the eye. Escape. Do another one. Everything will kind of flow out from the eye right there. Put a little extra small one there. So we learned no backface culling. Doesn't like that. Okay, that's as far as I'm going to go. But yeah, once we turn off backface culling, this is actually working quite nicely. One of the lines escaped inside, and grab, delete, and I'll just fix that one. I think it's important to have that line just for some of the definition. Back to spline tool, continue from there. Line. Okay, so now we've got a decent little bit of flowing mesh here. So having done that, you know what? I went this far. I'll just put a little bit around the lip, just so we get kind of like the basics of the face. Escape. Okay, so we've got that, and that's a spline. So we could hide this, and now you can see I've just got this spline that I've drawn out. And what's cool is like I've taken on the form of the face with whatever subdivisions I put on, and it's just looking pretty good. It's looking nice. Now this would probably be a case where I would do something like add a recall tag or make a copy of it. And I can double click, store it. So now I've got the state of it as it is. Change this to other types, like a B-spline with whatever subdivisions. And you're going to see it's automatically going to smooth it out. B-spline is the smoothest type of spline you can get, but it will make it a little bit more imperfect. You'll see that if I go to any of the sharper angles, you see how it's kind of away from the point, but that's what it's doing to make it smoother. If you don't like how much that's moving away from the line, even though in this circumstance I think that would be completely acceptable, then I would probably, you can go with Cubic or Kima. They tend to be pretty similar to me. You see it's very curvy, but they will perfectly hit the line. And a Kima is similar. So it's just kind of like stylistically which one looks best. But you can see we can start getting a little bit of jankiness in the curvature. So B-spline is the one that's going to give you the smoothest overall shape. So now that we get this kind of overall smooth shape going, then now we should probably save the scene file. For a... So yeah, this is the kind of thing where I wish I spent more time making things like this. Face lines. Because I know how to do this. Like you ask me a question, I'm like, cool, yeah, sure, I can make that. Like I can recreate anything you send my way. But then I don't go and make something pretty and then be like, oh, cool, there's a nice render. Let me put that out in the world. I tend not to do that. So now, anyway, now we've got the spline. We can make the basic shape by feeding in whatever we want. This could be... I guess the obvious go-to, let's do an end side, which should be the most similar to what we saw in the reference, and feed that into a sweep, holding down Alt, that the sweep will become apparent. Put the end side as a child, way too big, T for scale. Scale, 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 scale. There we go, something like that. And then, now we've got all these crazy overlapping lines. The B-spline should make it relatively even. We could change the distribution. Right now, it's intermediate points adaptive. So sharper curves will get more detail. However, we could say, no, I want uniform. We could decrease that number. And now you can see that it's going to have the exact same point count all the way through. And depending on what you're doing, that could be superior. Having done this, I could go to our sweep. We can turn off our caps. And then under Object... grab the scale. I'll add some extra points, holding down Command or Control, and then take the first point and scoot that down. So you see it pinches down to nothing. Grab this point, scoot it down so it pinches down to nothing. And as we pull these other points in or out, we can get those curves to transition the thickness along the overall line. Now, that is sort of a brute force tool that is going to make everything the same kind of blob shape. So you can see how, let's see, X-ray, no more, NR, NR, NR. You can see how that kind of just makes these big old blobs. Could work, could be fine. You might need more lines. Something I think would probably work a lot better overall would be making a duplicate of the spline. In this case, we don't need a copy of recall. And now it is automatically generating the thickness based on the rail scale. So if we were to go into the second spline and start moving these around, then that will pull in the thickness. So I could just grab all these inner points here, and if I move them off, you'll see that the thickness will automatically emerge from the distance I move these splines relative to their sibling spline. Now, one thing we should do is under sweep, turn off, which one? Rail scale. No rail direction. Yeah, we don't want rail direction. What we do want is this rail scale. Also, I should probably reset this parameter back to default. So reset the default. There we go. And now we're using rail scale. And everything got real plump right there. So that's what it looks like by default. Now we put in a rail scale. And rail direction. We want rail scale. I'm not sure what we're getting there. They're all getting real fat on the edge. I would think maybe it's because they're all existing in the exact same spot. So I'm going to select every point and scoot them all a little bit and see if it pops. No, they get fatter. Okay, now I'm confused. If all the points are exactly on top of each other, let me think. Why would it do that? I'm going to turn caps back on. Banking, rail scale, and a second spline. I mean, I'll remove the recalls just so you can see that recalls got nothing to do with that, because that, literally it couldn't. But yeah, these two, like, why this one in particular? Like, why is it so freaking huge? What did I do wrong there? End growth? No. Burn Wolf. They're I wouldn't think that would be a problem because they're identical. Like they have the same point count, so I'd think it'd be able to handle each of them. Let me try turning on keep segments. No, that didn't work. Banking, no. Huh, that's super weird. I'm not sure. I'm not saying you're wrong, but that would make the rig a lot more difficult to work with because the proposed thing is if it doesn't like this a whole bunch of the same spline, I swear that we're able to do that. Just give me one moment. I'm going to put that into a connect and then make a duplicate of it. Nope, still does it. Yeah, the proposed solution here would be to explode the segments, which, where is it? Spline, add, no. Conversion, nope. Segments, explode segments. And now what's happened is every one of our different splines have exploded out into their own separate part. But that would mean that we need to make a sweep for every single one. And that's, I mean, it could be done, but it's going to be really tedious. And now you can see that it did work, but I don't feel like that's the way it should happen. So if I were to select all and then shrink, I'm selecting all the points except for the inner one. And now I could start pulling this out. And so now we could essentially artistically paint what the thickness of these is supposed to be. I could even like do things like scoot that up a little bit to influence it going further. But now I could, individually grab points and determine what the thickness of any singular one should be. But you can see we have to make copy after copy after copy. I'm almost certain that we could get around not doing that. And it's to such an extent that I'm trying to think of how I might do it. I guess we could do it with a vertex map. Okay, since it's not working the way I want it to, I have a completely ridiculous and unrelated way of doing it. So let's try that. Well, I mean, we're going to use the same line. So I'm going to undo to the point where I should have made another recall. I got to remember to put recall in here every chance I get. Anyway, let's drop the sides down to 4. We'll give it a rounding because I think that's kind of what we saw in the other one. And that can go back to being, adaptive is fine. We'll make it sharper. So we can do something like that. That's kind of neat. Here's my thought. What if, I guess I might break the rounding. We'll turn off the rounding. If I were to make this end side really small like this, and then, I mean, we'd want to go really small, honestly. So now we got these really tiny lines, but we still have this original face bust. I probably need to subdivide it. So I can select all, right click, to a smooth subdivision. We probably want to go further, but that's as far as I'm going to go here. And on that female bust, create a vertex map. So this is getting weird. Set a vertex. Oop, that is not the right command. Selection, set vertex weight, 0. Okay, so we got this vertex map. So now we've got this spline. I want to displace that spline. Thank you very much. We'll do it with the quicker to calculate plane. That will be the final object. It will push out on Z. We'll say 50. I don't know what amount we want. Push out the points. Now you see everything super duper duper inflates, which is obviously way too much. So I'm going to say, what's the thickest we might ever want this to go? And you got to be careful here. If you don't push it far enough, then you'll never be able to make it thicker. So you probably want to go overboard. So make it way thicker than you think you need to. So now everything is getting displaced to be way bigger. So then I'm going to say, okay, plane effector, you are now limited to the vertex map, and you'll see everything will shrink back down again. But now the idea is that we could select this face, and I would probably even do some sort of extrusion. This is not the best thing to do, but I'm just going to D for extrude and then shrink the entire thing in a bit so we see our lines a little bit clearer. And now going to the vertex map, we could just start painting our vertex map, and let's see if this works. A little dangerous, but let's save it. And selecting the vertex map, actually, I think if we double click it, then we'll get our painting tool. And there we go. We need to lower our strength. So if I click my middle mouse button and drag it down as a button, you'll see that the power is getting weaker. Probably gonna go pretty dang weak. Oh my. That is, okay, let's go down to, can we go down to 0.1? 0.1, because it's getting applied again and again and again. Oh, doesn't like 0.1? Let's say add. There we go, haha. Okay, 0.1's maybe a little weak, so we'll say 0.25. So now, you can see that I can start, this is actually, I like this better than dragging the splines. I can now start painting, and as long as my subdivisions are pretty good, I should be able to start painting, and it's going to look at the thickness at the vertex map level, and I can paint on the power of these and have them go to whatever thickness I want them to be. So we're back to kind of an artistic zone for this. And now, I could keep on, like I said, make it as big as it could possibly need to go, because I want these to go far and, be able to get nice and big. Now I'm being pretty sloppy here. I could always hold down Shift, I think, and then Shift. I'm not sure what that was just doing. Oh, is Shift smooth? That's interesting. Is it Control? Yeah, okay. Holding on Control will shrink it, and I can't tell for sure because we're being really subtle with it, but it looked like if I hold down Shift that it's a smooth command. I thought we'd have to go do smooth, and that's what I was going to talk about. We can smooth things out. But if it's if we're getting these harsh transitions, it looks like holding down Shift is automatically adding some smooth. So that's really cool. I didn't know they added that in. So now I can just kind of paint and get these thicknesses, and if I'm a little sloppy, I can just hold down Shift and then pull it back again. I can right middle mouse button and make that a little bit smaller if I want to get real precise. So now you can see how I could get this to be thick, thinner, and then nice and thick in the parts, where it's relevant. And that's how we can start, getting really artistic and placing lines exactly where we want them to go. I think I'm trying to think of what the best way would be, but I would really like it if the tips always go down to 0 and we didn't have to be super precise and make sure that they were going all the way down to 0. So let's go on this one. I'm going to intentionally, let's push this up stronger. It's taking too long to paint. So I'm going to intentionally push this like really fat. So, see that gets huge. Hold down Shift to make it a little smoother. So I just want to see the tip of this thing getting a little bit overly big. I think if I were to, let's see, if I were to make a copy of this connect, so I mean, it's a copy of the entire spline, select all my points, UK to shrink it, delete. Now we only have the endpoint of those, okay? Does that work? Because I was going to go into this and say I want to use fields. Now that freeze is containing our painting. So in this case, we do want to keep the freeze. But then the thought was adding in this spline. But the spline, I don't want it to come in as a spline, honestly. I want it to come in as a point object. But even still, I might be able to do a long and radius. And then this is now setting a color. And then fall off along curve. Give me a moment. I just need to, yeah, okay. So now you see it's really, now what I'm saying is like, I want everything to be really strong, except on the endpoints. You see, well, the endpoints are now really strong. You see how those are all super inflated on the endpoints. And now that I've done that, I would invert it. So inside, there are a couple different ways of doing it. In fact, connect, mapping, invert. There, okay, so that's inverting, and now I can multiply. Okay, that was a lot of work, but I think that did it. That is now this, as long as we had our final lines, that is now an automatic way of making sure that the end tips never get bigger. And I'm pretty sure we can still paint on this thing. Maybe. I wonder if maybe you can't continue painting once it's frozen, which is not the biggest deal, because then I would just feed it into a second vertex map. So in this case, I guess I'm not certain, but it seems like we can't continue painting if it is. So I turn that back off again, and we're back to being able to paint. And yeah, immediately it allows me to paint again. So maybe that's like the last step. But I think it's kind of neat. I think the more subdivisions you put on this head, the more you'd be able to like get more accuracy for painting this. Also, potentially, you wouldn't use the head. You could make a geometry version of this spline and then paint it however you want. And keep in mind, I could also make this brush really big and like get everything kind of, a little bit closer to where I want. So, you wouldn't necessarily have to be as meticulous as I was being in a bunch of those parts there. Smooth, smooth, smooth. Bring these up a little bit. Smooth, smooth, smooth. And now shrink that down and start tackling the individual ones a little bit more. A little bit fatter, a little bit thinner. Yeah. And so, yeah, I would go through and start creating stuff like this if I was being nice and artistic with it. And eventually, once you have all of these built out exactly the way you want to, then you hide the original head and you just will end up with, can I still paint while those are hidden? Oh, I can't. That'd be really nice because it is kind of visually interfering with us. So it'd be really nice if we didn't have to see it and still paint, but I'm not surprised that we can't. So yeah, kind of fun. And I'd go through and start painting each of these individually. Once they're all painted, then we'd have the option to do some bevels on it or combine them in whatever way. And then you could put this into, you could explode this out as individual elements or put it into a fracture object or potentially do some sort of double sweep on these because they are referencing this as a vertex map. So the, let me see if I can show you. This should still work. I'll save that under, let's see. I want to take this spline, which is what's getting referenced, pull it out, and then make a duplicate of it via a cloner, MoSpline. That will be a spline. I want to reference a spline, grow mode, separate segments, destination spline. I don't want that. I want to say line shape. Spline will reference the original one. So now this MoSpline should be a copy of the original one. So if I drag this in, rail width. It seems to be taking on the rail width. Don't use rail scale. Aha. Okay, so there we go. Now, so that's a MoSpline. But the reason I did that is because I'm pretty sure we can do this now. Yeah, so you can see how a lot of these could combine and start doing additional elements. Honestly, I think a lot of what made that other thing nice is not these wormy looks, but that really sharp look. So once it looked like this, I could see putting a bevel in there. It's a little dangerous, but I'll do it. Create a bevel deformer, drop that in. I am beveling edges. Limit, please. Well, bevel hasn't been behaving for me. That should work, right? Let's put it after the plane effector. As soon as I turned on the limit, it didn't do anything. I guess we are really small. Okay, I guess maybe it was just so big. So yeah, beveling those edges like that after the displacement, and then those become those nice sharp edges. And then that entire thing could be fed into a subdivision surface, and you'll get those nice sharp but hard edges, which I always, I super dig that type of look. And you end up with this type of geometry. And what's cool is like, I think this rig is all still pretty dang live. So yeah, actually, yeah, look at how nice that is. I can still go back in here and paint. So as we make this rig more and more kind of advanced, it's still actually super responsive to getting painted on. And yeah, because of the way we made these splines, we didn't explode them out or anything. So we could just go back into this original spline object and be like, you know what? I need another line right there. I need another line right there. In fact, let's try it. You never know. I will save because you never know if you're going to do something Cinema super duper doesn't like. But let's try going back to drawing and click, click, click. Oh, it generated a new spline. Don't want that. Deselect, deselect, and then possibly select the face as well. Now it keeps making a new spline. I'm not sure why it's making a new spline. Before it wasn't making a new spline, but now it's in all sorts of, it's referenced in places. Yeah, it's strange. I don't know what, maybe, I bet you it's because it's not a Bezier spline. Yep, I was right. So now that it's back to being a Bezier spline, let's see if we can do it live. Do it live. Yeah, look at that. So it's not going to be the super smooth mode, but as long as it's in the Bezier. Wow, okay, so this is actually pretty cool. Now these are going to have no thickness because there's nothing drawn over there for them to have thickness. But this is actually not too bad. It'd probably be a good idea to, right now we're displacing them, but we could have some sort of displace override or something. Like I could make a different plane effector, turn this one off. This one could be a full-on delete that, and now everything's getting applied. I could be like, okay, I just want to see it all the time, so I can do a 15%. And now while I'm drawing it, it's like, okay, I'm getting a pretty good feedback in general of what they're doing. And yeah, now that we're here, this is not taking very much thought at all. I think even the mode we were doing before, like there's so much more to think about. And now this is just feeling like super kind of artistic-y. So yeah, doing all those drawing. And then, like I said, that's the basic form. And it's like, okay, cool. That was my drawing mode. Turn that off, turn this one on. And now we can go back to selecting the vertex map, double click the vertex map, and we're back in paint mode. Yeah, look how quick it is to kind of jump into those different modes. Hold down control and shrink, paint. Yeah, it took a couple steps, but that's not too bad. Not too bad at all. Now let's see how quick we can jump. Oh, I made a vertex map on the. That'd be something. I don't think. Did I accidentally click to make a vertex map there? Why did it put one there? That does make me want to do a quick test, but I just want to see how quick. Can I just say, okay, that's the connect. Go back to drawing. Draw. Yeah, okay. You can see how freaking quick that is to do. Like I can jump between those two modes by double clicking there or clicking on the connect, going to draw spline mode and starting to draw some splines. And yeah, there you go. So don't count on your 3D software being like, oh, I'll just automatically make that. Now, technically, you could do something like X particles and make a whole flow, like make this flow around the surface everywhere. But the particles wouldn't be a very good distance away, and you'd have to isolate them to the ones that end up being very close. There'd be a lot of different steps to making that work. So honestly, it just goes through like, okay, just go through and start drawing. Oh yeah, and keep in mind your Bezier mode. Ultimately, I would want this to go to B-spline, which will be smoother. But when you're drawing, it has to be in Bezier. Otherwise, it's going to jump out because it only draws in Bezier, which I guess kind of makes sense. Neat. I'll save that. And yeah, let's see what time it is. It's already over, but let's see if there's one more question to possibly tackle. Save. I'm assuming that it was more of the modeling look that you were kind of asking about, so I think that's a fine place to sort of wrap that one up. Let's see, hide, ba-da-da, spooky. Oh yeah, and then I wasn't doing it, but obviously this entire thing can go into a symmetry. There we go, ba-ba. And that probably we could probably draw as well with symmetry. I mean, I guess now I'll do it because I want to see. Click on that, click on that, click on that, draw, and let's see if this works in symmetry. Sure does. Neat. That's kind of fun. Get a scan of your own face and you can go and draw like a crazy mask. The like it's even kind of giving you these painterly strokes kind of thing. Like even look at that. That's kind of neat by itself. And then you take that as semi-final geometry. Let's see if what happens here. Now I'm just going off the rails, but why not? We'll save that as C. And we'll add a recall tag. Store the state. I'm going to take this entire thing and throw it into a volume builder. We're real small. Put that into a volume mesher. And now we get this blob. So we're going to have to keep on decreasing our voxel size. 0.2 is not bad. 0.15. Yeah, so that gets relatively sharp there. And now we get this singular mesh that's all blobbed up. That can be, let's turn that off for a moment. Make that not quite so big. Not quite so many intersections. Yeah, I like that. So now we get that, and that could be as sharp or as smooth as we want. We could probably drop this down to 0.1 safely. Yeah, so that's not bad. And now that we've got this crazy mesh, I could take that entire bit of nonsense. And actually, here's what's fun is I could drag our recall up there, store another recall. So I'm making a copy, and then holding down Control as I double click, I've made another store state of it. So now I can take this and feed this entire thing into, I will save, feed this into a remesher. And that remesher is going to, is calculating right now. Calculate. I guess we're throwing, yeah, that's a lot of geometry to throw at it. So we'll give it a moment to initialize. I think it finished. And B, yeah, so now this is creating remeshed geometry, and I want this to be at, let's say, 20% of what it currently is. So now it needs to calculate again. I think Rick had said that it caches the geometry so it doesn't take as long as you do subsequent ones. So there we go. Now we've got a lower-ish, this is lower poly version of this mask, not that many polygons. I could drop it down to 10% of that. Let's see what that gives us. Okay, yeah, once we get to a certain point, we will start losing it. But now, I went to 1%. No wonder. I was like, that looks really... we lost a lot of detail on that one. But yeah, drop this down to 10%. And now you see our poly count has become quite reasonable overall. And now we get that version of the mask all set up as a blob. And that's, that's pretty cool as well. I like that. And then we could move our recall tags up again, make a duplicate of that one, and then override again, save that one. And now I could be like, okay, let's double click and I can go back to this original mesh. It becomes that original mesh, double click on this one. And now we've got our volume mesher version of it, and then double click on this one and we'll go back to our final one. But it does get reinitialized. So I have to reinitialize. Actually, it was really quick. So now you can see that that has all come back, and it's really easy to jump between those states using the recall tag. I had seen a comment about how R23, somebody thought that R23 made it so that recall was redundant. I was like, nothing about R23 changes anything about recall. I think that they thought that the new pose morph, the new pose manager did it, but the pose manager only records like keyframe sliders, where this you can record hierarchies and changes of poly counts and any changes in the object manager whatsoever, not just a single number getting animated or position changing. But yeah, this little transition here and making this is pretty cool. I like it. I wonder, it's dangerous because of all these layers happening. And this is super duper dumb. I just want to, for the fun of it, I'm going to paint one last time here. But I imagine the instant I click, it's going to be like recalculating. So let me just see what happens. So the first click will probably be fine. The second one is going to generate geometry. You know what? Not as bad as I thought it would be. Concerning, it's rebuilding the mesh every time. Blop, 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 blop. Yeah, that's actually not bad at all. Yeah, so it's actually, I'm still drawing on it in this state. So I think there might be a nice big full tutorial out of this, isn't it? So yeah, pretty cool. Nice question. This is the animation. Yeah, soft bodies and have it crawl around the face. I don't know about that. Let's see. Carlo, are you asking about scene nodes? Carlos is asking if I've gotten any crashes with selection nodes. I've crashed it tons of times. It's super easy to crash it because, first of all, who knows? It could be unstable, but it's really easy in the new scene nodes to feed in, like, say, feed one thing that shouldn't be fed into something else, and then it's going to try and do a crazy amount of calculations. So it could go either way. I've crashed it tons of times. So you just have to be really logical in the way you connect things. But when I think about Espresso, I learned Espresso by just plugging everything into everything. And if you're going to get crashes by plugging half the things into half the things, that's dangerous. So yeah, it's, I don't know. It's maybe not entirely stable yet, and maybe just really dangerous to plug certain nodes into other ones. Dishonored masks for the coming war. Yeah, I mean, we could go. I mean, it goes to the kind of thing that we could stick around on this, and we could. Let me store this state again. Actually, that's all outside of it, so that's fine. I can go back to this blobbed one, and actually even here inside of our volume builder, we could put a smoothing, and that's going to super duper blob it down. But if we push this back down to like 25%, then yeah, we can smooth those out a little bit. And of course, we could go and start rendering stuff, like make some redshift materials and make it look super awesome. And we could spend time and go and down like a daily render type route and try and make something that looks really pretty. That's not what my specific goal is here, but it's something that could be done. Here. That's the painterly one. Here's the two combined, so that's extra blobby. That's super crazy though. I know, I like it. I like it. Let's see. Is there any short question we can tackle before we wrap this one up? Let's see. Oh, I see a spammy person here. Let me see if I can ban. Haha. Yeah, there's just a spam bot in there. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's actually probably going to wrap this one up. Thank you so much, everybody, for asking all these awesome questions. Do I know any learning resources for making plugins? No, not so much. It's just a lot of learning code. And then the SDK, the software development kit from Maxon. It's something you download, and then you can read all their math and how it connects in the cinema. But yeah, really neat. Oh yeah, Symmetry. I'm just catching up on some of the chats. It's hard to, when I'm doing these streams, I try and stay focused in cinema. I don't want this to be like a gaming stream where it's like, oh, thanks for the donation, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's really cool. And like names popping up. It's like, no, let's try and keep it clean and then cinema. But I guess speaking of that, that is all the more reason why it's super important if you are interested, if you like this kind of content, if you like these tutorials, if you like the live streams, and it helps support making of plugins as well. You can support on Patreon. If you head over to Patreon, you can get access to bonus live streams where I record tutorials and try and just tinker and learn extra things. You get the scene files. All the scene files I've been saving this entire time are going to be put up on Patreon on Friday. In addition to that, you get discount codes for Recall. So if you're supporting at if you're supporting at a $10 level, then you get an $11 coupon. If you're supporting at a $20 level, you get a $21 coupon. So you should definitely head on over and check out Recall if you haven't already. I use it so much. You saw it in the milk crate example where it's like I kept on making more and more of them as I go. And I jump back to previous steps all the time to be like, ooh, did I do that? Did I do this? And I can get to it just by double clicking. And it does a lot more. You should definitely check out the quick start video for tons of use cases for it. So I really, really like it. And by getting the plugin, it's the best way of supporting Rocket Lasso by getting something that's really useful for you as well. That will wrap this one up. As I said, I think next week will be the official season finale. I super appreciate all the support. Jeremy, Patreon, you can do it 1 month, and then after that month, just cancel. So yeah, it is potentially monthly, or it's also a single time if you cancel it. Rashid, thank you so much. Recall is so insane. Yeah, I really like it. I think it was something that needed to exist in cinema for a really long time. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming and hanging out. This was fun. I don't know. I like getting back to basics sometimes. We did a bunch of streams recently, but they're all over the place. And I like just tackling questions and answering them. And I really enjoyed this mask thing we just made. So maybe there can be something more official made from that as well. That should wrap this one up. Jeremy, I'm not going to speak about that, but the more support people can give by picking up Recall, the better. Yeah, that should wrap this up. We're working hard on other plugins as well. Next week will be another stream. I hope to get some bonus streams going for recording tutorials, maybe recording a tutorial about this mask thing, maybe recording a tutorial about nodes. But, nodes are not supposed to be used in production yet, so we'll have to see how it goes. Yeah, that'll do it. No more rambling. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you in a week. Bye-bye. Let's find this thing. There.